Welcome back to the channel. Today, we have a story that defines the burn the world romance. We are diving into They Thought She Was Worthless, a tale of a broken wolf who finds her strength in the arms of a ruthless king. If you love possessive alphas, satisfying revenge, and a love story that will heal your soul, you are in the right place. Do me a favor and like this video to help the algorithm find more pack members and subscribe so you never miss a new story. Let me know in the comments, what is the best revenge against a cruel alpha? I read every single one. Now get comfortable because the king has arrived. I was the pack ghost, the runt who slept in the stables and ate scraps from the floor. I learned to be invisible to survive. But invisibility didn't save me the night I spilled wine on the alpha's daughter. I curled into a ball on the stone floor, waiting for the blow that would finally kill me. I waited for the pain. Instead, the entire great hall went silent. The ground shook, and the most terrifying man in the world, High King Damon Voss, stepped over the table, crushed my abuser's wrist with one hand, and dropped to his knees before me. He didn't look at the alpha he just maimed. He looked at me, covered in filth and blood, and whispered the word that would burn the world down. Mine. Chapter 1. The Ghost of Silver Pine. I learned a long time ago that invisibility was a survival skill. If they didn't see me, they couldn't kick me. If they didn't hear me, they couldn't mock me. And if I didn't smell like a wolf, if I smelled like nothing but hay and horse manure, maybe they would forget I existed at all. I woke up before the sun. That was the rule. The rent wakes first. My bed was a pile of scratchy wool blankets in the corner of the stables. It was freezing, the kind of biting cold that settled into your marrow and stayed there until mid-July. Silver Pine was always cold, shadowed by the looming mountains that trapped us in this valley. "Up, girl," a gruff voice barked, accompanied by the sharp stinging slap of a riding crop against the wooden stole door. I flinched, scrambling out of the blankets before my eyes were fully open. It was Gray, the stable master. He wasn't a bad man, necessarily. He sometimes left extra bread for me, but he feared Alpha Miller too much to show me real kindness. "I'm up, Gray," I whispered, my voice raspy from disuse. Who would I talk to? The horses were the only ones who listened, and they didn't demand words. "Big day," Gray grunted, tossing a pitchfork at my feet. It clattered loudly on the stone floor. "The High King arrives at high noon. Alpha wants the stables spotless. If a single speck of dung touches the High King's stallion, Miller will skin us both." The High King. Damon Voss. The Butcher of the North. The name sent a shiver of dread through the entire pack, but for me, it just meant more work. The rumors said he was coming to collect the tithe, the taxes our pack owed to the Empire. Usually, the tithe was grain, gold, or livestock. But this year, the whispers said King Damon wanted something else. He wanted recruits for his Shadow Legion. I picked up the pitchfork, wincing. My ribs still ached from where one of the enforcers had shoved me into a wall 2 days ago for walking too slow. My hands were red and chapped, the knuckles swollen from the cold. I was 22 years old, but I looked 16. Malnutrition stunts you. Lack of shifting stunts you. I was the anomaly, the wolf who couldn't shift. The daughter of the former beta who had died of shame when his child turned out to be broken. Since his death, I had been demoted to the rank of Omega, but even Omegas had rights. I was something less. I was Reyna, the pack mule. "Get moving, Reyna," Gray snapped, looking over his shoulder nervously. "Miller is already on the warpath. He beat a sentry this morning for having a dull blade. Don't give him a reason to look at you." I nodded, keeping my head down. I started to shovel, the rhythm familiar and numbing. I didn't dream of kings or empires. I didn't dream of being chosen. I just dreamed of surviving the day without bleeding. Chapter 2. The Lash. By mid-morning, the main house was in chaos. I could hear the shrieking and giggling all the way from the stables. I was tasked with bringing the alpha's horses to the front trough for watering. As I led the massive black destriers out into the pale sunlight, I saw them. The chosen girls. They were lined up on the porch of the alpha's mansion, preening like exotic birds. Lila, Alpha Miller's daughter, stood at the center. She was breathtaking, blonde hair cascading in perfect waves, a fur-lined cloak hugging her curves, her scent radiating confidence and vanilla. Flanking her were Callista and Della, her two favorite sycophants. "Do I look all right?" Lila asked, twirling for her friends. "You look like a queen," Callista cooed, adjusting Lila's hem. "King Damon won't look at anyone else. You'll be sitting on the obsidian throne by winter." I kept my eyes on the gravel, tugging on the lead rope of a stubborn mare. I tried to make myself small, but the horse whinnied, drawing attention to us. Lila's gaze snapped toward me. Her smile vanished, replaced by a sneer of disgust. "Ugh!" she groaned, wrinkling her perfect nose. "Daddy, the runt is ruining the view. She smells like literal shit." The front door banged open. Alpha Miller stepped out. He was a large, thick-necked man who smelled of brandy and cruelty. He held a riding crop in his hand, a thicker, heavier one than Gray used. "Reyna!" he shouted. His face went red instantly. "I told you to keep those beasts in the back." "Gray said to water them at the main trough, Alpha. The back pipe is frozen." "Do not talk back to me," he roared. He marched down the steps. I didn't run. Running provoked the beast. I braced myself. Crack! The crop struck me across the shoulder, biting through my thin tunic. I gasped, biting my lip to keep from crying out. Crack! The second blow hit my thigh. I fell to my knees in the gravel. "You are a stain on this pack," he spat, standing over me. "Get those horses out of sight. If King Damon sees your filth, I will peel the skin off your back myself. Do you understand?" "Yes, Alpha," I choked out. "Get out of here." He kicked dirt into my face. Lila and her friends laughed, a cruel, tinkling sound. I scrambled up, grabbing the horses' leads with trembling hands. I dragged them toward the back paddock, my leg throbbing where the whip had cut me. I didn't cry. Tears were a luxury. I just focused on the pain. It was the only thing that felt real. Chapter 3. The Butcher Arrives. High noon. The air in the valley changed. It wasn't a sound at first. It was a pressure. The birds stopped singing. The wind died down. The horses in the back paddock began to pace nervously, rolling their eyes, sensing a predator far larger than a timber wolf. I hid in the hayloft of the old barn, pressing a rag to the bleeding welt on my shoulder. I peered through a crack in the wood. I knew I was disobeying orders by watching, but if I stayed on the ground, Miller might find me again. They came like a storm cloud rolling over the mountains. First, the outriders, massive wolves, black as pitch, running in formation. Then the soldiers in dark iron armor, their faces covered by visors that looked like skulls. And finally, the king. He didn't ride in a carriage. He rode a warhorse that looked like a monster, a beast twice the size of our pack's horses. High King Damon Voss. He was terrifying. Even from this distance, I felt the weight of his alpha aura pressing down on my chest like a physical hand. He wore black armor with a fur cloak made from the pelts of what looked like white bears. He wasn't wearing a helmet. His hair was dark, shorn close at the sides, and his face was a landscape of harsh angles and brutal indifference. A scar ran through his left eyebrow, giving him a permanent look of danger. The Silver Pine pack was lined up to greet him, heads bowed low. Alpha Miller looked small compared to King Damon. Damon didn't dismount immediately. He sat there, staring down at them. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just let them sweat. "Alpha Miller," the king's voice boomed. It wasn't a shout, but it carried across the acres effortlessly. It sounded like rocks grinding together. "Your Majesty," Miller squeaked, bowing lower. "Welcome to Silver Pine. We are honored." "Are you?" Damon asked. He swung down from his horse with lethal grace. "We have prepared a banquet. We have gifts." He gestured frantically to Layla, Callista, and the other girls, who straightened up, beaming their brightest smiles. Damon didn't even glance at them. His eyes swept over the compound, cold and bored. He looked like a man who had seen everything and found it all wanting. Then, for a split second, his head snapped up. He inhaled sharply. His gaze bypassed the mansion, bypassed the girls, and locked directly onto the barn, onto the crack in the wood where I was hiding. I froze, my heart hammering against my ribs. "He can't see me," I told myself. "I'm a ghost. I'm too far away." His nostrils flared. He frowned, a look of profound confusion crossing his face, as if he heard a melody in a storm. Then he shook his head, rubbing his chest as if it ached, and turned back to Miller. "Let's get this over with. I have a kingdom to rule."
Chapter 4. The Kitchen Scramble. The sun went down, but the work didn't stop. Because I was unfit for sight, I was relegated to the kitchens. The heat was unbearable. Roasting pigs, steaming vegetables, baking bread, the smells were overwhelming. My stomach cramped with hunger. I hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. The head cook, a frantic beta woman named Mara, pointed at me with a ladle. "We're short-staffed. 2 of the servant girls fainted when they saw the king's guards. Cowards." I shook my head, my eyes widening. "Alpha Miller said I couldn't be seen. He whipped me this morning, Mara. If he sees me—" "He won't see you if you keep your head down," Mara hissed, shoving a heavy silver pitcher of red wine into my hands. "He's drunk on brandy and fear. He needs wine on the table, Reyna. If the king's cup goes empty, Miller will kill us all, not just you. Do it." She tied a clean white apron around me, covering the bloodstain on my tunic. "Don't look King Damon in the eye," Mara ordered. Poor move. Do you understand?" "Yes, Mara." My hands were shaking. The pitcher was heavy, and my shoulder throbbed with every movement. I walked to the double doors of the great hall. I could hear the noise inside, the clattering of silverware, the forced laughter of the pack elders trying to impress the obsidian soldiers. I pushed the door open and slipped inside. The hall was dazzling, candles everywhere. Lila was seated at the high table, right next to the empty chair where the king sat. She was leaning in, touching his arm, laughing at something he hadn't said. King Damon looked murderous. He held a goblet in one hand, his knuckles white. He wasn't eating. He wasn't drinking. He was staring at the door, his leg bouncing with restless, aggressive energy. His eyes kept darting around the room, searching, hunting. I started at the far end of the room, serving the lower guards. I made myself invisible. Poor move. I worked my way up the tables. The scent in the room was suffocating. Perfume, roasted meat, and the overwhelming metallic scent of the king's power. It smelled like ozone before a lightning strike. I reached the high table. My heart was in my throat. I just had to pour wine for Alpha Miller and his wife, and then I could leave. I approached Miller's left side. He was deep in conversation with one of Damon's generals, boasting about his warriors. "More wine, Alpha?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Miller turned, startled. His eyes focused on me. Recognition dawned, and then pure, unadulterated rage. He hadn't expected me to disobey his order. "I told you," he hissed, his voice low so the king wouldn't hear, "to stay out of my sight." "The cook," I stammered. "Useless bitch," he snarled. He reached out under the table and pinched the fresh welt on my thigh. I gasped in pain, jerking back reflexively.
My elbow knocked into the heavy silver pitcher. It tipped. Chapter 5. The Execution. Time seemed to slow down. I watched in horror as the pitcher tipped forward. It didn't hit Miller. It emptied its entire contents onto Lila. A tidal wave of dark red wine splashed across the front of her pristine, white fur-lined gown, soaking her to the skin. Clang! The pitcher hit the stone floor, the sound ringing like a funeral bell. Silence. Absolute, terrified silence descended on the great hall. The music stopped. The eating stopped. Lila stood up, shrieking, "My dress! You stupid, worthless little rat! You ruined it!" I scrabbled backward, falling onto my bottom on the cold stone. "I'm sorry," I gasped, tears instantly springing to my eyes. "I'm so sorry I didn't—" "Sorry?" Alpha Miller roared. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. The vein in his forehead was throbbing. He was humiliated. His runt had just ruined his daughter's presentation to the king. The alcohol and his temper boiled over. "You defy me?" Miller snarled, his eyes flashing red. "You embarrass me in front of the king?" "No, Alpha, please," I begged, crawling backward. "I am done feeding a broken mouth. You are a liability, Reyna, and I am culling the pack tonight." He didn't just slap me. He stepped forward and kicked me hard in the ribs. Crack! The sound of the bone breaking was audible in this silent hall. I screamed, curling into a ball, clutching my side. The pain was blinding. I tasted copper in my mouth. "Daddy, make her pay!" Lila screeched. Miller reached down and grabbed me by the hair, hauling me up. I dangled from his grip, sobbing. He extended his claws, long, sharp, and lethal. "I'm going to open your throat," Miller whispered, positioning his claws against my jugular, "and I'm going to throw your carcass to the pigs." He raised his hand to strike the killing blow. Grrrr. The sound didn't come from Miller. It came from the head of the table. It was a sound so deep, so primal, that it shattered the crystal goblets on the table. It was the sound of a tectonic plate shifting. It was the sound of death. Miller froze, his claws inches from my neck. Everyone turned to the king. King Damon Voss was standing. His chair had been knocked backward. His eyes were no longer human. They were glowing a violent, molten gold. Darkness seemed to bleed off him, shadows stretching from his boots to swallow the light in the room. He wasn't looking at Lila. He wasn't looking at Miller. He was looking at the blood trickling from my lip. "You broke her," Damon said. His voice was quiet, terrifyingly quiet. He stepped over the table. He didn't walk around it. He stepped onto the banquet table, crushing plates and food under his heavy black boots. He moved with a speed that defied logic. He jumped down, landing between Miller and me. The floor shook with the impact. Damon didn't shove Miller. He grabbed Miller's wrist, the one holding my hair, and squeezed. Crunch. Miller screamed as the bones in his wrist pulverized. He dropped me. I hit the floor, wheezing, unable to breathe through the pain in my ribs. Damon threw Miller across the room like a rag doll. The Alpha hit a stone pillar with a sickening thud and slumped to the ground unconscious, or dead. Then the Butcher of the North turned slowly to face me. The shadows swirled around him, violent and possessive. I stopped breathing. I stared up at him through my tears, waiting for him to finish what Miller started. He fell to his knees. The armor crashed against the stone. He didn't hurt me. He hovered over me, his hands shaking as if he were terrified to touch me. He leaned in, burying his face in the crook of my neck, inhaling the scent of my blood and my fear. "Who did this?" he roared, his voice shaking the foundations of the castle. "Who touched my mate?"
Chapter 6. The Silence After the Storm. The roar still echoed in the rafters, but the silence that followed was heavier. My mate. I was lying on the cold stone, curled around the fire in my side, where Miller had kicked me. King Damon hovered over me, a wall of black armor and vibrating rage. His golden eyes were wide, the pupils blown so large they swallowed the iris. He looked frantic, like a man who had found a diamond in a pile of ash and was terrified it would shatter. "Don't," I wheezed, shrinking back when his hand reached for me. My instinct screamed that alpha hands only brought pain. "Please, don't hit me." The king flinched as if I had slapped him. The golden glow in his eyes dimmed, replaced by a devastating, human sorrow. "Hit you?" he rasped. "I would cut off my own hands before I let them hurt you." "Your Majesty!" Alpha Miller's voice cracked from the other side of the room. He was struggling to push himself up, clutching his shattered wrist. Blood dripped from his nose. He looked dazed. "Forgive me," Miller stammered, his face pale. I didn't know. She is a runt, sire. A broken thing. I was merely disciplining a clumsy servant. I had no idea she was yours." Damon stood up. The movement was fluid, like a panther uncoiling. The tenderness he had shown me vanished instantly, replaced by the mask of the butcher. He turned to Miller, his shadows stretching long and dark across the floor. "Disciplining?" Damon repeated. His voice was low, a rumble of thunder before the strike. He stepped over me, placing his body between me and the rest of the room, a living shield. "You broke her ribs. I heard the bone snap." "She is an Omega!" Layla shrieked from the side, clutching her wine-stained dress. "She ruined my gown. She's nothing. Why are you protecting her? She's just a stable rat." Damon turned his head slowly. He didn't shout, he didn't roar. He just looked at Layla with cold, dead eyes. "One more word, and I will tear your tongue out of your head and feed it to the crows." Layla's mouth snapped shut. She paled, shrinking back behind her friends. Damon turned back to Miller. "You touched her. You kicked her. You intended to kill her." "It was a mistake," Miller cried, backing away until he hit the wall. "Take the tithe, take double the gold. Just leave us be." "I am taking the tithe. I am taking the only thing of value in this entire wretched kingdom." He bent down, sliding his arms under my knees and shoulders. I gasped as the movement jostled my broken ribs. "I know." He whispered against my forehead. "I know it hurts. I've got you." He lifted me effortlessly, holding me high against his chest plate. "We are leaving," Damon announced to the room. "And if I ever see any of your faces again, pray to your gods, because I won't be as merciful as I was tonight." Chapter 7. The Departure. The walk to the courtyard was a blur of pain and confusion. I rested my head against the cold metal of his breastplate, smelling the leather and the deep, woodsy scent of him. It masked the smell of my own fear. The obsidian soldiers waiting outside snapped to attention as Damon kicked the doors open. "My king," a captain shouted, seeing me in his arms. "Is the girl a prisoner? Shall we shackle her?" "This is not a prisoner," Damon's voice rang out, sharp and commanding. "This is my mate. Anyone who looks at her wrong loses their eyes. Anyone who touches her loses their hands. Is that understood?" A collective gasp went through the ranks of the soldiers. Then, instantly, they slammed their fists over their hearts. "Yes, sire."
They roared as one. I was trembling uncontrollably. Mate? It wasn't possible. I was wolfless. I was broken. The moon goddess didn't give mates to things like me. He had to be mistaken. He was smelling the blood or the fear and confusing it for something else. You're shaking, Damon noted, his voice dropping to a murmur only I could hear. I'm cold, and I think I'm going to pass out. Stay with me, Reyna, he ordered, urgent but soft. He carried me to his massive war horse. He didn't toss me up or hand me to a subordinate. He mounted the horse first, swinging into the saddle with impressive strength, and then settled me sideways across his lap, cradling me like a child. My ribs, I whimpered as the saddle shifted. I know, he said, his jaw tight. I need to get you to the healer at the war camp. It's a 2-hour ride. Can you hold on? I don't have a choice, I breathed. He unclasped his heavy fur cloak, the one made of white bear pelts, and wrapped me in it. It was heavy, warm, and swallowed me whole. It smelled like him. Safe. Ride, Damon commanded his men. We thundered out of the Silver Pine compound. I watched the lights of the Alpha's mansion fade into the darkness. I was leaving the only hell I had ever known, but I had no idea if I was riding toward heaven or a different kind of cage. Chapter 8. The Ride. The journey was agony. Every hoofbeat sent a shockwave of pain through my side. I tried to stay rigid, to hold myself up so I wouldn't jostle the broken bones, but my strength was failing. I hadn't eaten in 2 days, and the shock of the attack was setting in. Damon seemed to sense every flinch. Lean against me, he instructed, his arm tightening around my waist to absorb the shock of the horse's gait. Stop fighting it. Let the armor take the weight. I slumped against his chest. The metal was hard, but his body heat radiated through it. Why? I asked, my voice barely a whisper in the wind. Why what? He asked, keeping his eyes on the dark road ahead. Why me? I coughed, tasting blood again. I'm nobody. I'm the runt. Miller said I was worthless. Damien's hand tightened on the reins. I heard the leather creak. Miller is a fool who measures worth in teeth and claws. I measure it in spirit. You stood in that hall, beaten and starved, and you still tried to apologize to the girl who mocked you. You have a quiet strength, Reyna, and... He paused, glancing down at me. His golden eyes were glowing in the dark. And you smell like home, he finished softly. You smell like the only peace I have ever known. I didn't understand. I smelled like horse manure and old wine. But before I could ask, a wave of dizziness hit me. The world tilted on its axis. Damon, I slurred. It was the first time I used his name. I've got you, he said. The blackness rushed up to meet me. I felt myself going limp, sliding into the dark. The last thing I felt was his hand pressing my head against his neck, protecting me from the fall. Chapter 9. The Healer. Get the healer, now! The roar woke me up. I was no longer on the horse. I was moving, being carried through a bustling camp. I heard the sounds of canvas flapping, swords being sharpened, and men shouting. This way, sire! I was laid down on something soft, a cot. The smell of medicinal herbs and rubbing alcohol hit my nose, stinging and sharp. She has broken ribs. Damon's voice was right beside my ear. Left side, and severe malnutrition, and welts on her back and legs. Step back, sire, a female voice said firmly. I need room to work. I am not leaving her, Damon snarled. I didn't say leave. I said step back. You're blocking the light. There was a pause, a huff of annoyance, and then the shadow over me moved. I blinked my eyes open. A woman with gray hair and sharp green eyes was hovering over me. She wore the robes of a field medic. This was Ilara, the Legion's head healer. "Hello, dear," she said gently. "I'm going to cut your tunic open. I need to see the damage. Is that all right?" I gripped the furs beneath me. It's all I have to wear." "We will burn these rags and get you silk," Damon said from the corner. He was pacing, looking like a caged tiger. The healer cut the fabric. The cool air hit my skin. She prodded my side gently, and I hissed, arching off the cot. 3 ribs fractured, she diagnosed efficiently, but no puncture to the lung, thank the goddess. The bruising is severe, though. She looked at the welts on my shoulder from the whip. Her lips thinned. "These are fresh. This morning." "And the older scars?" she asked, tracing a faded white line on my arm. "Years," I said. Damon made a sound in the corner, something between a sob and a growl. He turned his back to us, punching the tent poles so hard the wood cracked. "Fix her," he ordered, his voice thick with emotion. "I need to bind the ribs and give her a poultice for the bruising, but mostly, sire, she needs food, real food. She's starving to death."
Chapter 10. The First Meal. An hour later, I was bound in clean bandages and wrapped in a soft wool blanket. The pain was a dull throb now, dampened by a bitter tea the healer had made me drink. The tent was quiet. The healer had left. It was just me and the king. Damon sat on a stool next to the cot. He held a wooden bowl. "Broth," he said. "Ilara said you can't handle solid food yet. Your stomach has shrunk." He dipped a spoon into the broth and held it to my lips. I stared at him. The butcher of the north, the man who had crushed an alpha's wrist with one hand, was feeding me like a bird. "I can do it," I said, reaching for the spoon. "Your arm is bruised," he said, pulling it back slightly. "Let me." I opened my mouth. The broth was rich, salty, and warm. It tasted like life. Tears pricked my eyes again. I hated how much I was crying today. "I'm sorry," I whispered, swallowing. "For what?" "For being weak, for crying, for this." I gestured to my broken body. "You wanted a tithe. You wanted soldiers. Instead, you got a cripple." Damon set the bowl down with a sharp clack. He leaned forward, bracing his hands on the cot on either side of my hips, trapping me. "Look at me," he commanded. I looked. His golden eyes were burning. "You survived. You lived in a house of monsters for 20 years and you survived. That is not weakness, Reyna. That is power. Any other wolf would have broken or fled. You endured." He reached out, his finger tracing the line of my jaw. "I have an army of soldiers. I have generals and killers and spies. I don't need you to fight for me. I need you to exist. I need you to eat. I need you to smile." "Smile?" I asked, confused. "Yes," he said, his gaze dropping to my mouth. "I destroyed their hierarchy tonight because they hurt you. But I will burn the rest of the world down if that's what it takes to see you smile just once." He pulled back, picking up the bowl again. "Now eat, before I get angry at the soup for getting cold." For the first time in a decade, a tiny, fragile warmth bloomed in my chest that had nothing to do with the fever. I opened my mouth for the next spoonful. Chapter 11. The Vigil. I woke to the sound of rain drumming against the canvas roof of the tent. For a terrifying second, I thought I was back in the stables, that the water was leaking through the rot in the wood to soak my blankets. I curled in on myself, bracing for the cold. But there was no cold. There was warmth. Thick, heavy furs tucked tightly around my chin. A mattress stuffed with down feathers, not straw. And a scent, sandalwood and dark earth. I opened my eyes.
The tent was dim, lit only by the dying embers of a brazier. King Damon was there. He wasn't in his bedroll. He was sitting in a wooden camp chair pulled right up to the edge of my cot. His arms were crossed over his chest, his head bowed. He was asleep, fully armored except for his helm. I stared at him, my heart doing a strange flutter in my chest. He looked different when the golden fire wasn't burning in his eyes. He looked younger, tired. There was a smudge of dirt on his jaw, and his dark hair fell over his forehead, softening the harsh lines of his face. The butcher of the north, the monster who slaughtered packs. And yet, he had sat in a hard wooden chair all night to watch me sleep. I shifted slightly, testing my ribs. The pain was a dull ache now, manageable. But the movement made the cot creak. Damon's eyes snapped open. There was no grogginess, no moment of confusion. 1 second he was asleep, the next he was completely alert, his hand dropping to the hilt of the dagger at his belt. His gaze locked on me, and the tension left his shoulders. "You're awake," he said, his voice rough with sleep. It sent a shiver down my spine. "You stayed. You didn't have to." "I told you," he said, leaning forward to check the bandages on my neck. "How is the pain?" "Better," I said honestly. "Thirsty." He poured a cup of water from a pitcher and held it to my lips. I drank greedily. "We need to move out within the hour," Damon said, setting the cup down. "The Legion can't stay stationary in this valley. It leaves us exposed. Can you travel?" "I can ride," I said, trying to sit up. "If I go slow." "Absolutely not," he growled, pushing me gently back down. "You are not getting on a horse with 3 broken ribs. I have prepared the supply wain. It's been cleared out and lined with furs. You will ride there." "The supply wain?" I blinked. "But that's for equipment. I'll be in the way." "Reyna," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You are not in the way. You are the cargo, the most precious cargo this army has. You ride in the wagon so you don't break. Do you understand?" I nodded, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. He spoke to me like I was rare porcelain, not cracked clay pot. It was confusing. It was terrifying, because porcelain shattered so easily.
Chapter 12. The Iron Carriage. The supply wain turned out to be a reinforced iron carriage, usually used for transporting the king's war chest and maps. It was windowless to protect against arrows, but the interior was surprisingly spacious. Damon lifted me inside, settling me into a nest of blankets. "I will be riding alongside," he said, standing at the open door. "If you need anything at all, you knock on the wall. I will hear it." "I'll be fine," I said, clutching the fur cloak he had given me. The door closed, plunging me into semi-darkness. The carriage lurched forward. The journey was long. Without windows, I lost track of time. I dozed in and out of consciousness, lulled by the rhythm of the wheels. But dreams brought memories, and dreams brought memories. I was back in the great hall. Miller was laughing, holding a knife. But it wasn't my neck he was cutting. He was cutting Damon. He was peeling the armor off the king, laughing as Damon bled. "Worthless. He made you weak." I woke up with a scream tearing from my throat. "No!" The carriage stopped instantly. I heard shouting, the sound of horses reining up hard. The iron door was ripped open, letting in blinding daylight. Damon was there. He looked frantic, his sword drawn. "Reyna, what is it? Who is here?" I was curled in the corner, hyperventilating, tears streaming down my face. I... Damon sheathed his sword and climbed inside, filling the small space. He grabbed my shoulders. "Look at me," he commanded. "You're safe. You're with me." "I had a dream," I sobbed, the shame crushing me. "I'm sorry. I stopped the convoy for a dream."
Damon didn't scold me. He didn't tell me to toughen up. He pulled me into his chest, burying his face in my neck. "Breathe," he murmured, rocking me slightly. "It was just a memory. Miller is miles away. He can't touch you. I broke him. Remember? He called you weak in the dream. He said I made you weak." Damon pulled back, holding my face in his large, gloved hands. "Look at me," he said fiercely. "I have conquered kingdoms. I have killed Alpha Primes with my bare hands. But holding you, keeping you safe, that is the hardest thing I have ever done. It doesn't make me weak, Reyna. It gives me something to lose, and that makes me more dangerous than I have ever been." He kissed my forehead, a lingering pressure. "Leave the door open," he ordered the driver. "I want her to see me." He rode the rest of the day right beside the open door of the carriage, his golden eyes checking on me every few minutes, proving the nightmares wrong.
Chapter 13. The Obsidian City. 3 days later, the landscape changed. The lush green forests of the Silver Pine Valley gave way to jagged peaks and dark volcanic rock. We were entering the heart of the Obsidian Empire. I sat up, wincing at the ache in my ribs, and looked out the open door. The capital city, distinctively named Blackhold, was carved directly into the side of a massive mountain. It was a fortress of black stone, towering spires, and iron bridges spanning deep chasms. It looked impenetrable. It looked intimidating. "We are home," Damon said, riding close to the carriage. As the Legion approached the massive iron gates, a horn blasted. The gates groaned open. I expected silence. I expected the people to hide from the butcher and his army. Instead, a roar went up. Thousands of people lined the streets. Wolves, humans, children. They were cheering. They threw petals on the cobblestones. They chanted his name. "Damon, Damon, High King." I shrank back into the shadows of the carriage. They loved him. To me, he was a savior, but to the world, he was a conqueror. And here, in his city, he was a god. "Why are they hiding?" I whispered to myself. Damon heard me. His hearing was impossible. "They aren't hiding. They are celebrating the return of the Legion. We keep the borders safe. We keep the rogue packs from slaughtering their villages." He looked at me, his expression softening. "You are safe here, Reyna. No one in Blackhold will hurt you. They know the penalty." We rode through the winding streets up toward the highest peak where the citadel stood. It was a castle of black glass and stone piercing the clouds. The carriage stopped in a private courtyard. The noise of the city faded, replaced by the sound of a fountain and the wind. Damon dismounted and came to the carriage. He held out his arms. "Come, let me show you your cage." I flinched at the word. "A joke," he corrected quickly, grimacing. "Bad joke. Let me show you your home." He lifted me out, carrying me toward the massive double doors. Servants lined the steps, heads bowed low. They smelled of fear and respect. "Welcome home, Your Majesty," an elderly steward said, bowing deeply. "Prepare the royal suite," Damon ordered, walking past him without stopping. "And get the royal physician. I want a second opinion on these ribs." "The royal suite?" "Sire, the servants' quarters are usually in the lower levels." Damon stopped walking. He looked down at me, his eyes burning. "You are not a servant, Reyna. You are the queen. You sleep where I sleep."
Chapter 14. The Imposter. The royal suite was bigger than the entire stable barn back at Silverpine. It had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire empire. The bed was massive, draped in black velvet and silver furs. There was a fireplace large enough to roast a whole ox. Damon set me down on the edge of the bed. "I have to meet with the council," he said, looking torn. "I have been gone for weeks, and the generals will be waiting. Will you be all right here?" I looked around the opulent room. I felt small, dirty, out of place. "Yes." "The servants will bring you a bath and fresh gowns," he emphasized. "Rest. Do not try to unpack. Do not try to work. Just rest." He leaned down and pressed a kiss to the top of my head. "I will return for dinner." He left, the heavy doors clicking shut behind him. I sat there for a long time, listening to the silence. It was too quiet, too big. A knock at the door made me jump. "Enter," I squeaked. A line of maids filed in. They carried a tub, buckets of water, oils, towels, and armfuls of silk dresses. They moved efficiently, heads bowed. "Your Majesty?" the lead maid said. She was a pretty Omega with kind eyes. "I am Elin. We are here to assist you." "Please," I said, standing up and holding my side. "You don't have to call me that. I am just Reyna." Elin looked up, surprised. Then she saw the bruises on my face, the way I hunched to protect my ribs. Her expression softened into pity. "You are the king's mate. That makes you Majesty. Come, let us wash the road off you." They bathed me, but unlike at the camp, they rubbed scented oils into my skin, jasmine and amber. They dressed me in a gown of soft gray silk that felt like water against my skin. It had long sleeves to hide the bruises on my arms, but the neckline revealed the fading yellow marks on my throat. I stood in front of the full-length mirror. I didn't recognize the girl staring back. She looked clean. She looked expensive. But her eyes were still the eyes of a frightened animal waiting for the trap to snap shut. I'm an imposter. I'm just a runt in a stolen dress. Chapter 15. Old Habits. 2 hours passed. I had bathed, I had dressed, I had eaten the fruit platter left for me. And now I was panicking. At Silver Pine, stillness was dangerous. If you weren't working, you were lazy. If you were lazy, you were punished. Sitting on the velvet couch, staring at the fire, my skin began to itch. I felt exposed, useless. I have to do something, my mind raced. I have to earn my keep. If Damon comes back and finds me just sitting here, he'll realize I'm worthless. I looked around the room. It was spotless, but the fire was dying down. I can fix that. I got up, ignoring the twinge in my side. I went to the woodpile by the hearth. I picked up a heavy log. It strained my ribs, but I grit my teeth and knelt before the fire, arranging the wood, blowing on the embers until they caught. Then I saw dust on the mantel. I found a cloth on a side table. I started wiping the heavy stone mantel. Then I started organizing the books on the king's desk. I straightened the papers. The door handle turned. I froze, the cloth in my hand. Damon walked in. He was still in his black tunic, looking exhausted. He stopped dead when he saw me. He looked at the cloth in my hand. He looked at the soot on my new silk dress from the fireplace. He looked at the perfectly arranged desk. His face went blank. "What are you doing?" he asked. His voice was dangerously quiet. Panic seized my throat. The fire was dying, sire, and the desk was messy. I just thought I wanted to be useful. I didn't want you to think I was lazy." I dropped the cloth, backing away, my hands trembling. "I'm sorry, I won't touch your papers again. Please don't be angry." Damon crossed the room in 3 strides. I flinched, closing my eyes. He didn't hit me. He grabbed my wrists, pulling my hands away from my body. "Look at me," he commanded. I opened my eyes. He wasn't angry. He looked devastated. "Reyna," he said, his voice cracking, "you are my queen. You do not clean my hearth. You do not organize my desk. You command armies. You sit on thrones." "But I have to work," I whispered, tears spilling over. "If I don't work, I have no value." "No," Damon groaned. He pulled me into his chest, burying his face in my hair. "No. Your value is that you breathe. Your value is that you exist. You never have to lift a finger again as long as you live. Do you hear me? You are done serving." He held me while I cried, staining his tunic with my tears and the soot from the fire. "We have so much to undo," he whispered into the silence of the room. "But I have time, little wolf. I have a lifetime."
Chapter 16. The Rot in the Blood. The royal physician was a man named Thorn. He was ancient, his skin like parchment paper, but his eyes were sharp as a hawk's. He had spent the last hour running tests on my blood, humming to himself in a way that made my skin crawl. Damon stood by the window, vibrating with impatience. He hated anyone touching me, even a healer. "Well," Damon barked, unable to wait any longer. "Why is she so small? Why hasn't she shifted? Is it genetic?" Thorn set down a vial of my blood. It was dark, almost black in the candlelight. "It is not genetic, sire," Thorn said gravely. "Her father was a beta, her mother was an omega. She should be a standard wolf, perhaps even strong given the beta lineage. But she isn't stunted by nature, she is stunted by poison." The room went deadly silent. "Poison?" I whispered. "But I've never eaten anything strange. I ate scraps." "Not ingested," Thorn corrected. "Administered, likely since childhood." He picked up the vial. "There are traces of silver ash and wolfsbane in your marrow, small doses. Just enough to keep the wolf dormant, just enough to keep you weak, malleable, and unable to defend yourself. If you had tried to shift with this in your veins, it would have killed you." Damon turned slowly from the window. The look on his face terrified me. It wasn't the hot rage of the banquet hall. It was a cold, Arctic fury. "Miller," Damon said. The name was a curse. "Why?" I asked, trembling. "Why waste poison on a runt?" "Because you weren't a runt. You were likely a threat, or the child of someone they feared. They didn't want you dead. They wanted you broken. They wanted a slave, so they made one." Damon crossed the room and fell to his knees before my chair. He took my hands, his grip desperate. "They stole your wolf," he rasped. "They stole your life." "Can it be fixed?" I asked Thorn, hope and terror warring in my chest. "I can flush the poison," Thorn nodded, "but it will be painful. And when the wolf wakes up, she will be angry." Chapter 17. The Fever. The flushing treatment began that night. It felt like fire. Thorn gave me a draft that tasted like liquid iron, and within an hour, my body was burning. I thrashed on the massive velvet bed, sweating through the silk sheets, crying out as my bones ached. It felt like my skeleton was trying to rearrange itself. "Damon!" I screamed, the pain spiking in my spine. "I'm here. I'm right here." He was behind me, holding me against his chest. He had stripped off his tunic, his skin hot against my back. He let me claw at his arms, let me dig my nails into his skin until I drew blood. He didn't flinch. He just murmured ancient words of comfort in the old tongue, rocking me through the worst of the waves. "It hurts," I sobbed. "Make it stop." "It's the poison leaving you. You have to fight it, Reyna. Push it out." Around midnight, the fever broke.
I went limp against him, gasping for air. The room smelled wildly of ozone and heavy rain, my scent, but amplified 1,000 times. And then I felt it, a scratch, a presence in the back of my mind, a low, distinct growl that wasn't Damon's. Mine. It was weak, tired, and furious, but it was there. My wolf. Damon, I breathed, clutching his hand. She's awake. Damon rested his forehead against my temple. I could feel his heart hammering against my back. I hear her, he said, his voice thick with emotion. She is singing to mine. Chapter 18. The Shadow Legion. Recovery took a week. I was weak, but for the first time in my life, I felt whole. The emptiness inside me was filled with a simmering energy. My hearing was sharper. I could smell the pine trees miles away. Damon refused to let me stay cooped up. "You need to see your protectors," he said one morning, helping me into a thick fur-lined cloak. He led me down to the training grounds. The Shadow Legion, thousands of the most lethal warriors in the world, stopped their drills the moment we appeared. They didn't just bow. They went to one knee, fists over hearts. "They know," I whispered, intimidated by the sea of black armor. "They know you are my mate," Damon said, "which means you are their queen. But I want you to know them." He introduced me to his commanders. There was Kale, a massive brute with a scar across his nose, and Valen, a lithe female warrior with knives strapped to every limb. "We heard about Silver Pine," Valen said, looking at me with intense respect. "We are ready to march on your command, my queen. Just say the word, and we will finish what the king started." "Finish it?" I asked. Looking at Damon, I thought Miller was dealt with. Damon stiffened. He hadn't told me everything. "Miller survived," Damon admitted, his jaw tight. "I crushed his wrist and broke his pride, but I didn't rip his throat out. I wanted to get you to safety first." A cold dread settled in my stomach. Miller was alive. The boogeyman of my childhood was still breathing. "He won't come here," Damon promised, sensing my fear. "He is broken. He has no army that can touch the Legion." "He doesn't need an army," I whispered, remembering the cruelty in Miller's eyes. "He just needs a law." Chapter 19. The Summons. My instincts were right. 2 days later, a raven arrived at the Citadel. It carried the seal of the Council of Alphas, the governing body that oversaw pact disputes to prevent total war. Damon read the scroll in the strategy room. I watched the paper crumple in his fist, eventually bursting into flames from the sheer heat of his aura. "What is it?" I asked, standing by the door. I wasn't supposed to be in here, but I refused to hide anymore. Damon turned. His eyes were glowing gold. "Miller has filed a grievance," he spat. "He claims I violated the Treaty of Borders. He claims I entered his land under the guise of the Tithe, assaulted a ruling alpha, and stolen a member of his pack." "Stolen?" I laughed, a bitter, sharp sound. "He gave me away. He called me a tithe." "He is claiming he was under duress. He claims you are a vital member of his pack, a lost beta bloodline. He wants you returned. He wants me back so he can kill me. I know he humiliated me. If I go back, I'm dead." "You are never going back," Damon roared, flipping a heavy oak table over. "I will burn the council before I let them take you. If you refuse the council, it's war. I know the laws. All the packs will unite against the Obsidian Empire. You can't fight the whole world, Damon." "I can," he said, stalking toward me. He grabbed my face gently. "For you, I would fight the gods." "But your people." I looked out the window at the city below, the families, the pups. they would suffer. I took a deep breath. My wolf stirred, growling at the threat. "Where is the hearing?" "The neutral lance. In 3 days." "Then we go," I said. Damon stared at me. "Reyna, no. Miller will be there." "Let him be there," I said, my voice surprising even myself. "He thinks I'm a broken runt. He thinks I'm the girl who cowers in the stable. He doesn't know what you woke up inside me."
Chapter 20. The Choice. The preparation for the summit was a flurry of activity. Damon was terrifying. He doubled the guard. He threatened the council messenger with dismemberment. But amidst the chaos, he made time for me. The night before we were to leave, he brought a box to the royal suite. "No silk today," he said, setting the box on the bed. I opened it. Inside lay a suit of armor. It wasn't the heavy iron of the Legion. It was black leather reinforced with silver chainmail. It was fitted for a woman, for a queen. "I had the smiths forge this the day we arrived," Damon said quietly. "I hoped you would never need it." I ran my hand over the cold metal. "It's beautiful." "There is one more thing," Damon said. He reached into his tunic and pulled out a dagger. The handle was carved from obsidian, the blade etched with runes. "This belongs to my mother. She was a warrior queen. She taught me that a king protects his people, but a queen protects the king's heart." He placed the dagger in my hand. "If Miller comes near you," Damon said, his eyes fierce, "do not wait for me. You put this through his eye." "I will," I promised. He pulled me into his arms. We stood there for a long time, the silence heavy with the weight of tomorrow. "They think they are summoning a victim. They have no idea they are summoning a storm." I looked up at him. "Let's go show them." Chapter 21. The neutral lands were a bleak stretch of tundra between the territories, a place where no grass grew and the wind sounded like weeping. It was fitting. This was a place where packs were broken, and packs were buried. I rode beside Damon's warhorse. I wasn't in the carriage this time. I was on a mare of my own, dressed in the leather armor he had given me, the obsidian dagger strapped to my thigh. My ribs were wrapped tightly, the ache a dull throb that kept me focused. "Stay close," Damon murmured as the council hall came into view. It was a massive coliseum of gray stone, ancient and imposing. "I'm not leaving your side," I promised. We rode into the central plaza. It was packed. Wolves from dozens of packs had gathered, sensing blood in the water. Rumors of the Alpha King stealing a mate had spread like wildfire. I felt their eyes on me. They were looking for the stolen beta. They were looking for the victim. Instead, they saw me, head high, shoulders back, wearing the crest of the Obsidian Empire. Then, I saw them. The Silver Pine delegation stood near the entrance. Alpha Miller looked healed, his wrist splinted, his face twisted into a mask of righteous indignation. Beside him stood Lila, wearing a new dress, looking smug. When Miller saw me, his eyes widened. He didn't expect the armor. He didn't expect the girl on the horse. He expected the runt in rags. My heart hammered against my ribs, a phantom echo of the fear I used to feel. "He can't hurt you," I told myself. "You are the queen." Damon dismounted first. He walked over to my horse and reached up, his hands spanning my waist to lift me down. He didn't let go immediately. He held me there, in front of everyone, his forehead brushing mine. "You are breathing too fast. Your scent is spiking." "Ideally, I would be invisible," I admitted, my voice shaking slightly. "You were never meant to be invisible, Reyna," he growled low in his throat. "Let them look. Let them see what they threw away." He took my hand, lacing his fingers through mine. We walked up the steps together. As we passed Miller, The alpha sneered. Cleaned up nicely, didn't she? Amazing what a bath and stolen silks can do for a stable rat, Miller muttered, loud enough for only us to hear. Damon stopped. The air pressure dropped. Keep walking, Damon. I squeezed his hand, my voice hard. He wants you to strike first. Don't give him the satisfaction. Damon looked at Miller, then at me. A dark pride flared in his eyes. As my queen commands, he said loudly.
Chapter 22. The Tribunal. The council chamber was a circular room with tiered seating. 5 elder alphas sat on the raised dais, the judges of our world. They were old, scarred, and radiated power. Damon and I stood in the center of the pit. Miller stood opposite us. We are here to address the grievance of Alpha Miller of the Silver Pine Pack, the head elder announced. His voice echoed off the stone walls. He claims High King Damon Voss violated the sacred treaty by abducting a pack member during a diplomatic visit. Abducting? Damon laughed. It was a terrifying sound. I liberated her. She was stolen, Miller shouted, stepping forward. He played the part of the grieving leader perfectly. Reyna is a ward of my pack. Her parents died when she was a pup. I took her in. I fed her. I gave her a home when she was too weak to shift. And in return, the Keem storms into my hall, assaults me, and drags her away like a spoil of war. He pointed a shaking finger at me. She is confused. She is a simple-minded girl. She likely went with him out of fear. Look at her. She is dressed for war because he forces her to be something she is not. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Miller was spinning a good story. He made himself the benevolent father figure and Damon the tyrant. She is not simple-minded, Damon snarled, stepping forward. And she was not fed. She was starved. She was beaten. Lies, Miller countered. She is fragile. She bruises if the wind blows too hard. I tried to protect her. Protect me? My voice rang out. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the shouting. The room went silent. I stepped out from behind Damon's shadow. I looked at the elders. Then I turned and looked directly at Miller. You protected me with a riding crop. You fed me scraps from the floor. You made me sleep in horse dung. She is delirious, Miller scoffed, waving a hand dismissively. The king has clearly brainwashed her. I am not brainwashed, I said. Unclasping the collar of my armor, I pulled the leather aside, revealing the fading yellow bruising on my neck and the scar on my collarbone. Did the king do this, Miller? Or did you do this when I was 12 because I dropped a saddle? The elders leaned forward. Those are old marks, he said quickly, sweat beading on his forehead. Accidents. She's clumsy. And the ribs? Damon interrupted, his voice lethal. The 3 ribs you shattered the night I arrived, are those ancient history? He faltered. She tripped. She fell. I didn't trip. You kicked me, because I spilled wine on your daughter's dress. Chapter 23. The Evidence. He said she is a beta. Thorn, the royal physician, stepped forward from the gallery. He carried a heavy leather satchel. Who is this? An elder asked. I am the high physician of the Obsidian Empire, Thorn said, bowing. And I have evidence that Alpha Miller is not just an abuser, but a traitor to the biological laws of our kind. Miller went pale. He knew. Thorn opened the satchel and produced the vials of my blood. The girl, Reyna, was presented as a beta, Thorn explained, holding the vial up to the light. A runt who could not shift. But upon examination, before the treatment, we preserved a sample. We found high concentrations of silver ash and wolfsbane in her marrow. Gasps filled the room. Poisoning a wolf to suppress their shift was a capital offense. It was torture. She is not a runt, Thorne declared. She is a powerful wolf whose nature was chemically suppressed since childhood. Alpha Miller didn't take her in, he enslaved her. He poisoned her to keep her weak so he could use her for labor. That is impossible, Miller shouted, veins bulging in his neck. I never poisoned her. Her parents were weak. It's genetics. We tested the poison, Damon said, his voice dropping to a low rumble. We checked the trade records. You've been buying silver ash for 20 years. Damon turned to the elders. He stole her birthright. He tortured her, and he tried to kill her in front of me. I did not steal a member of his pack. I saved a queen from a monster. The head elder looked at Miller with disgust. Alpha Miller, these are grave accusations. If true, your title is forfeit. Your life is forfeit. Miller looked around the room. He saw his allies turning away. He saw the trap closing. He looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw the mask slip. The benevolent father was gone. The sadist was back. She isn't a queen, Miller spat, his voice trembling with rage. She is the daughter of a traitor. Her father tried to overthrow my father. I kept her alive out of mercy. I should have drowned her in the river the day she was born. The confession hung in the air. There it is, I whispered. The truth. Chapter 24. The Last Resort. You admit it, the head elder said, standing up. You admit to withholding her status and abusing her based on a blood feud. I admit that I did what was necessary to keep my pack pure, Miller roared. And I demand my rights. If you claim she is a wolf, if you claim she is strong, then let her prove it. Miller drew his sword. The sound of steel ringing filled the chamber. I invoke the right of challenge, Miller shouted. If she is a queen, let her fight for her freedom. If she wins, she goes. If she loses, I take her back, dead or alive. She is recovering from broken ribs, Damon bellowed, stepping in front of me, his own hand reaching for his blade. I will fight in her place. No, Miller grinned, a feral, ugly thing. The challenge is to her. She is the one claiming status. Unless the Obsidian King fights all his queen's battles because she is, in fact, a worthless runt. He was baiting me. He wanted to shame Damon. He wanted to prove I was weak. The elders looked at each other. The law is clear, the head elder said reluctantly. If the status of a wolf is in question, a challenge can be issued. But the female is injured. It cannot be to the death. To submission, then, Miller sneered. First one to yield. Damon turned to me, gripping my shoulders. Reyna, no, refuse. I will burn this building down before I let you fight him. I looked at Miller. He was huge, experienced, violent. But if I refused, I would always be the runt. I would always be the girl hiding behind the king. And Miller would always be the monster under my bed. I looked at the dagger strapped to my thigh, the queen's dagger. I accept, I said. Reyna, Damon grabbed my arm. He will kill you. He won't stop at submission. I know, I said, looking up into Damon's terrified golden eyes. You woke me up, Damon. Let me show you what you found. I pulled away from him. I walked into the center of the ring. Draw your weapon, Miller. Chapter 25. The Storm Breaks. Miller laughed. He didn't use his sword. He tossed it aside, unbuckling his belt. I don't need steel for you, girl, he said, shifting his shoulders. I'm going to break you with my bare hands, just like old times. He lunged. He was fast, but I was smaller. I ducked under his swinging fist, the wind of it rushing past my ear. My ribs screamed in protest, but the adrenaline numbed it. I slashed out with my dagger, catching his arm. A thin line of red appeared. "You little bitch!" Miller roared. He spun and backhanded me. It connected. I went flying, hitting the dirt hard. The breath left my lungs. "Get up!" Damon's voice was agony from the sidelines. The guards were holding him back. Miller was on me before I could scramble away. He grabbed me by the throat, pinning me to the ground. His weight was crushing. "You thought wearing armor made you a warrior?" Miller hissed, saliva hitting my face. He squeezed, cutting off my air. "You are nothing. You are dirt." I clawed at his hands, my vision spotting. I couldn't breathe. The darkness was creeping in. "Die," a voice in my head whispered. "Just let go." "No, no." I looked past Miller. I saw Damon. He wasn't struggling anymore. He was frozen, his face a mask of absolute horror. He was watching me die. I wouldn't let him watch that. A surge of heat exploded in my chest. It wasn't the fever. It was the poison leaving. It was the wolf waking up. I let out a scream that wasn't human. Energy blasted out of me. Pure, raw, kinetic force. It threw Miller off me. He flew 10 feet through the air, crashing into the stone barrier. I scrambled up. I didn't reach for the dagger. I felt my bones cracking, rearranging. The pain was excruciating, but it was right. Fur sprouted, claws elongated. My jaw snapped and reformed. For 22 years, I had been trapped in a cage of skin. In the center of the council ring, in front of the king and the gathered alphas, the runt of Silverpine ceased to exist. In her place stood a wolf. Not a normal wolf. She was massive, sleek, and her fur was pure, shimmering silver, the mark of a royal bloodline thought to be extinct. I threw my head back and howled. Miller stood up, looking at the silver beast in front of him. For the first time in his miserable life, the alpha looked terrified, because he realized he hadn't been starving a runt, he had been starving a predator. Chapter 26. The Silver Wolf. The world looked different through the eyes of the wolf. Colors were sharper, smells were richer, and the fear that had ruled my life for 22 years was gone, replaced by a cold, predatory instinct. I stood on 4 paws, my silver fur bristling, my claws digging into the dirt of the arena. I was massive, larger than Miller, larger than any wolf I had ever seen, save for the king's beast. Miller was frozen. He stared at me, his face pale, his mouth hanging open. The runt was gone. In her place was a legend. The silver wolf was a myth in our culture, a sign of the goddess's direct favor, a bloodline of queens. I projected the thought, my voice echoing in the minds of everyone in the arena. You called me worthless. I lunged. Miller tried to shift, but he was too slow, too paralyzed by terror. I hit him with the force of a battering ram. My teeth clamped onto his shoulder, the same shoulder he had whipped me on just days ago. Bone crunched. Miller screamed, a high-pitched, pathetic sound. I thrashed my head, throwing him across the ring. He tumbled through the dirt, scrambling to get away. The alpha who had terrorized me, who had treated me like livestock, was now scuttling away like a frightened crab. I stalked him. I didn't run. I prowled. The audience was silent. Even the elders were on their feet. Miller hit the wall of the arena. He looked up, blood bubbling from his shoulder. "Mercy," he cried out. "Reyna, I raised you. I fed you." I growled, a sound like grinding stones. "You starved me." I snapped at his face, stopping inches from his nose. I wanted him to feel the fear I felt every morning in the stable. I wanted him to know what it felt like to be small. He whimpered, curling into a ball, exposing his throat in the ultimate sign of submission. "I yield," Miller shouted. "I yield. Take the win. Just don't kill me." I stood over him, my chest heaving. The victory roared through my blood. I had won. I was free. I backed away, lifting my muzzle to the sky to howl my victory. But Miller was a snake. As soon as I turned, he moved. He pulled a hidden knife from his boot, a violation of the sacred challenge. "Die, you bitch!" he screamed, lunging for my unprotected flank. He never reached me. A blur of black darkness slammed into the arena. King Damon didn't shift. He didn't need to. He vaulted the barrier, intercepted Miller mid-lunge, and caught the Alpha's wrist. There was no trial this time, no speech. Damon ripped Miller's arm out of its socket, spun him around, and tore his throat out with his bare teeth.
Chapter 27. The Knee. Miller's body hit the ground with a wet thud. Damon stood over the corpse, blood dripping from his chin, his golden eyes wild. He looked like the monster they accused him of being. He looked beautiful. He turned to me. The rage vanished from his face instantly. He walked toward me, ignoring the gasps of the council. He stopped a foot away. He didn't care that I was a massive wolf with teeth that could snap his arm. He reached out, his bloody hand trembling, and touched my silver snout. "Reyna," he whispered. "Shift back. I've got you." The adrenaline faded. My bones ached as I shifted, fur melting away to skin. I collapsed, naked and shivering, onto the dirt. Damon was there before I hit the ground. He wrapped his heavy cloak around me, shielding me from the eyes of the crowd. He lifted me into his arms. "Behold!" The head elder's voice rang out, shaking. "The silver wolf returns. The prophecy is met." The head elders scrambled down from their dais. They rushed toward us, falling to their knees in the dirt. "My queen," the head elder stammered, head bowed low. "Forgive us. We did not know. The Silver Pine Pack has harbored a deity and treated her as a slave. This is a crime against the goddess." "It is not a crime," Damon said, his voice cold as the grave. "It is a declaration of war." "We will punish them," the elder promised. "We will sanction the pack. We will—" "You will do nothing." Damon silenced him. "Silver Pine is not a pack anymore. It is a graveyard." He looked down at me, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "Are you hurt?" he asked, ignoring the worshipping masses around us. "No," I whispered, resting my head on his armored shoulder. "I'm just tired, Damon." "Sleep," he commanded. "When you wake up, the world will be different." He carried me out of the arena, stepping over Miller's body without looking down. The entire gathering of alphas parted like the Red Sea, bowing to the Runt who had become their queen. Chapter 28. Ash and Bone. We didn't go back to the Obsidian Citadel. Not yet. 2 days later, the Shadow Legion stood on the ridge overlooking the Silver Pine Valley. I sat on Damon's warhorse, dressed in fresh silks, wearing the crown of the Obsidian Empire, a circlet of black iron and diamonds. Damon sat behind me, his arms wrapped securely around my waist. Below us lay my prison, the mansion, the stables, the village that had turned a blind eye to my suffering for 20 years. The pack members, Lila, Gray, the enforcers, had been rounded up. They stood in the courtyard, surrounded by Damon's soldiers. They looked up at the ridge, terrified. "They stripped you of your name," Damon murmured into my ear. "They stripped you of your wolf. They stripped you of your dignity." He signaled to his general. "Burn it." The archers lit their arrows. The tips dipped in pitch. 1,000 points of fire illuminated the twilight. "Damon," I whispered,
The people. The innocent have been evacuated, he assured me. Gray and Mara are safe. But the legacy of Miller, the House of Silverpine, it ends today. The arrows flew. They struck the thatch roofs of the stables. They struck the timber of the Alpha's mansion. Within minutes, the valley was an inferno. I watched the stables burn. I watched the corner where I had shivered for a decade turn to ash. I watched the balcony where Lila had mocked me collapse into flames. It wasn't a tragedy. It was a funeral pyre for the girl I used to be. Look at it, Reyna. Damon whispered, his chin resting on my shoulder. I told you. I would burn their kingdom down for you. You did, I breathed, watching the sparks rise into the night sky like fireflies. It's gone. It's gone, he confirmed. You never have to go back. You never have to bow. You never have to be cooled again.
Chapter 29. The Smile. The heat of the fire warmed the ridge, chasing away the mountain chill. Damon dismounted and lifted me down. We stood in the tall grass, illuminated by the glow of the burning kingdom below. He turned me to face him. He looked anxious, the butcher of the north, who had just ordered the destruction of an entire legacy, looked unsure. He was searching my face, looking for fear. He thought he might have scared me with his violence. Did I go too far? He asked quietly. Do you think I am a monster? I looked at him. I saw the blood on his armor from the arena. I saw the reflection of the fire in his eyes. And I saw the man who had hand-fed me broth when I was too weak to lift a spoon. You destroyed my cage, I said. I would destroy the world, he vowed, if it hurt you. He reached out, his thumb tracing my lower lip. He whispered, a desperate note in his voice. You haven't smiled. Since the day I found you, you've cried, you've screamed, you've fought. But you haven't smiled. He dropped to his knees in the grass, the High King kneeling before the Runt. Tell me what you need, he pleaded. Tell me what I have to slay, what I have to buy, what I have to burn. I just want to see you happy, Reyna. I just want to see you smile. The absurdity of it hit me. The most powerful man in the world was on his knees begging for a facial expression. He loved me. He didn't just want me for my bloodline or my wolf. He loved me. The weight on my chest, the invisible stone I had carried since childhood, finally cracked. It started as a bubble in my throat, then a twitch of my lips, and then it broke free. I smiled, a real, wide, radiant smile that reached my eyes and crinkled my nose. I laughed, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. Damon froze. He stared at me like I was the sun rising after a long winter. The tension left his frame. He let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for weeks. He wrapped his arms around my waist and buried his face in my stomach, holding me tight. There it is. The only victory that matters, he whispered against the silk of my dress. Chapter 30. The Crown of Winter. Epilogue. The coronation took place a month later in the Obsidian Citadel. I didn't wear a dress. I wore the black leather armor Damon had forged for me, with a cloak of silver fur that matched my wolf. I walked down the aisle of the throne room. Thousands of wolves bowed as I passed, not out of fear, but out of reverence. I was Reyna, the silver wolf, the queen of the north. Damon waited for me at the altar. He looked magnificent in his crown, but his eyes were soft. Are you ready? He asked, taking my hands. I was born ready, I said, squeezing his fingers. I just needed someone to unlock the door. The high priestess stepped forward, holding the heavy obsidian crown of the queen. She placed it on my head. It settled there, heavy and right.
I claim you, Damon said, his voice ringing through the hall, as my queen, my mate, my soul. I claim you, I replied, my voice steady and strong, as my king, my shield, my love. He kissed me then. It wasn't the gentle kiss of the healer's tent. It was a claiming, deep, passionate, and full of promises. The crowd erupted in cheers, the sound shaking the stained glass windows. Later that night, on the balcony of the royal suite, we looked out over our empire. The city was lit up in celebration. "What are you thinking?" Damon asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my head. I leaned back into him. I thought about the cold stable. I thought about the pitchfork. I thought about the girl who wished she was invisible. "I'm thinking," I said, turning in his arms to look up at him, "that they were wrong." "About what?" I said, running a hand over the scar on his eyebrow. "They thought I was worthless, but I was just waiting for a king who knew the value of a queen." Damon smiled, a rare, beautiful thing, and I, he whispered, pulling me toward the bed, was just a monster waiting for a reason to be a man. He kissed me then, and in the darkness of the room, with the fireplace dancing on the walls, the runt and the butcher built a new kingdom, one not made of pain, but of love. The end.